publish. Welcome to the National Pulse. Brand new article up on the website seconds ago. I was just having to fix it in the last moment here, since Natalie Winters, who joins me in studio today, buried the lead on the story. Natalie, the story is the New York Times calling for an election intervention from the United Nations. We'll be getting into that and chatting about the debate tonight. Welcome to the National Pulse. Natalie, it's Wednesday. Where's your pink?
I know, I made a mistake. I forgot to wear pink today.
Absolutely outrageous. Add that to the list of problems we've had today. But this article was a very good catch and a very well written article. I just needed to stress in the lead. The New York Times is comparing the United States to Belarus and saying that Joe Biden needs to appeal to the world for help. Now, I believe that Joe Biden needs to appeal to anybody he could possibly get for help. Different kind of help, but they're talking about, what, electoral help? Remember 4 years ago, election interference was a bad thing. Foreign interference was prosecuted. There was one campaign in particular that was persecuted falsely because of this whole foreign interference line. Now, Natalie, the story goes that the New York Times wants the world to interfere in America's election process. Tell us more about this.
Peter Baynard, who is a contributing writer at the New York Times, he also is a contributor at The Atlantic, which we've covered extensively. They launder a lot of talking points for the Transition Integrity Project and other groups part of this effort to really delegitimize the election and ensure a Biden victory. And he's also a political commentator for CNN, so very much a mainstream guy. So what he's saying...
Mainstream,
yes.
Yeah.
Really is a tell for what kind of...
Not mainstream America.
No.
Mainstream swamp DC thinking, right?
Exactly.
What we call the Washington Consensus on this show. Peter Beinart is the Washington Consensus.
He epitomizes it. And in over 1,000 words, he lays out in an op-ed entitled, quote, "America may need international intervention." And again, this is appearing in the pages of the New York Times, which for over 4 years was sowing the story that President Trump asked for election interference, inherently saying that that's a bad thing, which we agree, right? We don't need any foreign country, any foreign body, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party or Russia, interfering in our election.
Oh, but Raheem, I'm all right.
Yes,
yeah,
well...
fine.
Bit of cognitive dissonance there, but...
Well, here's the difference, is that I am not a state actor. Right? I am an individual person who has a job that the US government knows about and has a requisite visa to do that job in this country. The United Nations has no job in American elections. It's never had a job in American elections. And, you know, my favorite part of this is, of course, the appeal to the world for help line. So just tell us a little bit more about how he shoehorned that one in.
What lines?
Well, he's comparing it to Belarus, right?
Yes,
and what the Belarusian protesters have done is appeal to the world for help.
So the bodies that essentially they're asking to get involved in the United States election. Number one is the United Nations Human Rights Council, and again, we highlight in the piece this body not only has countries like China, which again has been identified by the U.S. intelligence community as wanting a Biden victory, but even countries like Venezuela, Qatar, Sudan, Somalia. So the New York Times effectively wants us to cede any control that we have over our electoral process to not only countries that want to secure a Biden victory, but countries that can't even manage their own elections. I also think it's worth noting that when you see how China manipulated the World Health Organization, who's to say that they're not going to do the same or aren't doing the same with this hypothetical United Nations Human Rights Commission should they oversee our election. And some of the other bodies that they call to get involved are the OSCE, which is short for Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. This, again, is one of these bodies that is similarly partnered with the United Nations. It's partnered with the World Trade Organization, partnered with NATO, all these bodies that really the globalist alliance, keen on securing a Joe Biden victory, and they want to have them come in and analyze our elections. Interestingly enough, this group released a report. They've been operating in the United States since at least 2018, talking about how during our midterm elections, they thought that the United States did not afford equal suffrage to all individuals, straight out of the social justice left talking points.
Right.
But this group also has links to George Soros, which, again, we've exposed George Soros as not only seeking to fundamentally undermine the concept of a modern nation state and basically every fundamentally American value, but he's a supporter of Joe Biden and a supporter of Democrats extensively to the tune of billions of dollars. So George Soros actually delivered a keynote at this group's at a seminar that they were hosting. They've had advisors to the program go on to promote Open Society Project initiatives. They've even advised on certain issues of press freedom and other areas, so extensively linked to George Soros.
Right. Just hang on.
Sure.
I mean, in situations like these, when we've just broken a story like this, it's always good to reset.
Yeah.
So if the audience joining us late or didn't catch the intro, whatever it is, this is the New York Times' editorial, opinion editorial by Peter Beinart, CNN contributor, etc., calling for foreign interference now in the U.S. election. Natalie, we'll go to a break in just a second. I just want to make mention of the great work the team here at Real America's Voice is doing. I know we had some technical difficulties, so everybody's scurrying around trying to get them fixed, and they've done a remarkable job so far. So if you're hearing, and getting a lot of comments in the live chat, if you're hearing some audio things, we are fixing it, and we thank you for your patience here. In the meantime, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about more of the stories that Natalie Winters has been breaking over the last day or so. Natalie, we put that chair empty on the screen yesterday. I don't know if you saw. I had to show people that you were away at your desk working on all these great stories. This is the National Pulse. I am Raheem Kassam. Natalie Winters and I will be getting into the debate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. The story breaking right now on thenationalpulse.com is about this group that the New York Times says they want interference from at the US election. It's interesting, isn't it, that they're telling you that Joe Biden is ahead by 8 points, or 10 points, or 12 points, or 14 points, or 16 points, or 5 billion points. I'm sure there's some poll worker somewhere who's going to come up with that next. But if he's ahead by so much, why do we need election interference from the outside world to monitor and check and make sure that everything's going so well? If they're going to win, why are they also saying, oh, but we do need the United Nations to come in and oversee this whole thing? I mean, the United Nations, Natalie, can't even oversee the organization of the United Nations. Remember the peacekeepers who were supposed to go to Africa and stop massacres happening? They just watched while slaughter was taking place. The United Nations has human rights abusers on its Human Rights Council. It's a disaster of an organization. And the New York Times wants to invite these people in to monitor America's elections. Firstly, it doesn't make sense from a logical perspective. Like, how would that work? Why would an American court defer to the UN in deciding who's won the election? And the second part of it is it doesn't make sense if Biden's ahead, unless he's not really ahead. Unless all of these polls are rigging their methodologies. Oh, wait, that's right. Mark Levin said that I got that right. He said it was terrific. No, he said I was terrific, in fact. But these polls, I go through so many of them every single day. And I want to thank Mark Levin for that, by the way. Very, very appreciative for the kind words. It just doesn't make my head huge at all. I have just this polling stuff. You go through all of these every single day. There was a new one out this morning from YouGov and The Economist. Now I'm just lecturing you. Feel free to jump in. And The Economist, 300 pages long, this poll. So you've got to wonder what they're actually doing. With all of this information, with all of this data that they say they're extracting, you spend that much time and effort. You want something out of it. And here's what I think / know they want out of it. It's not to take the temperature of the nation. It's not to gauge the national pulse, if you will. But it's to impact how people vote and impact what they think about the election. Because here's the thing. If Biden's ahead by 12 or 14, it'll be 20 tomorrow, guaranteed, and he still doesn't win the election, then they can point at that discrepancy and say, we need the United Nations to come in and save us. The election's off. So they're creating a false sense of hope for Biden now and his campaign. And I think it's going to take a toll. It'll take a toll in the debate tonight. I think Kamala's going to go in there super cocky, right? Thinking that they're, they're just on top of the world as far as the polling goes. And that's why I think Mike Pence will probably win tonight, by exploiting that arrogance. I mean, she's already a very arrogant person. What say you to all of that?
I think the concept of false hope is also interesting when you analyze these polls, because conversely, when you see all these polls coming out about how the Biden campaign is ahead by double digits, like you said, perhaps 20 points, it's always interesting how that impacts voter turnout. But I think that kind of the buried lead there is that Democrats would rather have polls coming out that allow them to maintain a facade of victory, that Joe Biden is the preferred candidate, and they'd rather kind of push to the side the ramifications that saying, oh no, we have it in the bag because Joe Biden is ahead by 20 points, the ramifications that has on voter turnout, because the facade of power, and considering that they control all the institutions, right, polls are an integral part of the election landscape, as integral as their control of the mainstream media, right. The conventions, this is really what they're basing their campaigns off of. So I definitely think that these polls are obviously politicized, as you've pointed out. And I definitely think that you are correct and that Kamala Harris will waltz into tonight's debate feeling very, very confident. I don't think that she's an individual who, the more that she speaks, people like her more. I think it's the opposite.
They have been hiding her. It's not like she's been out there doing much over the last couple of weeks.
She's
supposed to be the one with the energy. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's similar to Joe Biden, except it's also totally opposite. They hide Joe Biden because he can't say anything. He can't get anything out. I think they hide Kamala because she's too intense. She's too polished. She's too Washington, D.C. political. And that's not what voters want. They like the anti-establishment Trump. They like a Trump who dunks on Meghan Markle. They don't like a Kamala Harris who it's so rehearsed all the time. And it's really, frankly, phony, whether it's the fact that she dunks on Joe Biden and a few months later later. She couldn't think of a better individual to lead the country, or the fact that she adopted a Chinese name to win votes. You name it. Phony is, I'd say, the best way to describe her.
I think we have to use this show to go back through some of Kamala Harris's best bits on the National Pulse. Stories that don't really get reported elsewhere, but that we dig into, you especially dig into a lot of the details that people miss. So stick around in the next segment and beyond. We'll be getting into more of those stories that you may have missed about Kamala Harris, because they don't appear on Politico. But what did appear on Politico this morning is the story of how the Democrats have been hiding Kamala Harris. So here's the question. Kamala Harris, phenomenally just unlikable, just totally unlikable person. Hates Joe Biden even. Biden probably resents her, if he can remember what she did to him in the debate. Joe Biden, corrupt as you like, swamp monster 50 years, terrible, terrible family situation with his son Hunter and all the corruption that's going on around that. It sold the country out to China. You have probably one of the worst Democratic tickets there's been in a long time. And at the same time, they're trying to convince you that Trump is down by 14 points or 16 points. Now, I will say this, because this isn't I'm not a cheerleader. I believe the Trump campaign is down. It's upside down slightly to Joe Biden, probably 4, 5 points, 6 maximum at the peak of the discord over the weekend. But there's no way that there's a 12 to 14 point gap, and this is one of the other ways you know. How does Emerson, one pollster, and Quinnipiac, another, how are they 8 points away from each other in polling in the same state? Somebody's getting it drastically wrong. Or maybe they're all getting it drastically wrong. We'll talk about that when we come back with Natalie Winters on the National Pulse. See you in a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse here on Real America's Voice. I'm just turning my fan off there. I left my fan on from the break. I need to cool down sometimes. So, yeah, it gets hot here at the National Pulse. Hot topics, hot scoops coming straight out of your computer screen. Natalie, talk to us about the one that you covered the other week. Kamala Harris changed her name, adopted a Chinese name when she was campaigning, and nobody wants to talk about this. Explain to us, remind us that there'll be people, new fans of Natalie Winters and the show, who didn't hear this the first time we broke it. What's the scoop?
Yeah, no one wants to cover this except Chinese state media, and that was where I was first tipped off to this story, because Chinese state media across all their different websites would always refer to Kamala Harris, and they still do. They have pages and pages of articles about her, and they refer to her as Hey Jin Lee. So at first I thought maybe it was a weird translation, but it turns out that when she was running for San Francisco District Attorney, she actually adopted the Chinese name Hey Jin Lee to be placed on the ballot, because obviously San Francisco is an area which is very heavy with the Chinese American population, and she thought that that would help her win votes. She was the first to do this. It later became a trend that a lot of candidates did, because they thought that individuals who spoke Chinese, if they saw a name that sounded familiar, they would ostensibly be more likely to check their name on the ballot. But a few years down the line, they actually ended up banning the practice, which was adopting a Chinese name if you weren't given one at birth. So that's just kind of the start of her long history of really pandering and really using race and ethnicity kind of as a weapon, right? Again, she claims in some cases in the mainstream media to be the first African-American selection for vice president. In reality, she's half Jamaican, half Indian, yet the media runs with it. She's never really had to answer for that. So
I wonder how much this is going to come up tonight. I don't expect Mike Pence to call her Hey Jin Lee. Probably should. See what happens. But no, the CCP in general, and I think it's a great line to make come up tonight. Actually the stakes on tonight are very high, because the nation kind of, and I didn't really feel this way about it, but they all seem to have, and going through the polling as well, depending on how much you believe it, people didn't like the last debate, right? They didn't like the way it went down. They didn't like what they said. Now, I liked it. I thought it's a debate. It's a rough and tumble. You got to take the rough with the smooth in politics, and that was certainly rough, but it was warranted. I mean, these two guys, there is no love lost between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, right? But tonight, I think people will be looking for, you've got the plexiglass and all of that, right? So they'll be looking for this kind of much more stiff, maybe even more policy-orientated rather than insult-orientated debate. And I think Mike Pence is fundamentally a very strong character when it comes to circumstances like that. The CCP coming up, and the links to China, and we're getting into another one of your scoops in just a moment about Kamala Harris's husband. But I would imagine that Mike Pence has to ask the question, do you believe that the Chinese Communist Party put this virus here? Is it their responsibility? Or do you, like your Democratic colleague Andrew Cuomo, call it the European virus? Let's get that out of Kamala Harris. Let's ask her what she thinks about Joe Biden's record on China. Let's ask her why Chinese state media keeps endorsing her and Joe Biden. Those are the sorts of questions that I think would really put someone like Kamala Harris on the back foot. What's she going to say? How do you respond to that? How do you turn that back around on Vice President Pence? I'm worried. The only thing I worry about is that it'll come back around to Democrat-led talking points. She'll try and pull the Vice President off in the direction of healthcare, for instance, or Roe v. Wade, for instance, he should not try and get into those things. I think he should steer her to their weaknesses. And that's something I wish the President would do more of publicly as well, is attack Joe Biden more.
I love talking about the Chinese Communist Party, and I think that if these debates were to cover that, whether it comes in the form of their trade deals, the way they've hurt our workers and our economy, or even most recently the coronavirus, I think that would definitely be a strong suit for the Republicans. But I think that with Kamala Harris, I think Joe Biden's Achilles heel, in a sense, is China, is the corrupt business dealings, is the fact that he's a hardcore globalist, and all those three things kind of go together, right? They're one and the same. But I think that Kamala Harris's Achilles heel is more so that she represents the far left faction of the Democratic Party that many...
Does she? She'll be able to point back to, I was attorney and I was a very strict one. I was very tough on law and order, very tough on crime. The meme is, I'm just pretending to be her at this point. The meme is Kamala's a cop. That's what they were saying about her when she was first in the thing. So I don't necessarily know. Why do you think that sticks?
I think when you look at her response to the riots going on, to Black Lives Matter, while I think that in her past she was a prosecutor and was ostensibly tough on law and order, I think it's interesting when you see how she talks about that track record now. She always seems to point out the fact that she went after rape cases and child abuse cases, which are horrible, but she never really talks about how she went after criminals and hardcore thugs and just kind of petty street crimes, violent street crimes, the law and order stuff. She always kind of paints it in an interesting way. I think that that's a track record.
But people vote for people on their records. They don't vote for them necessarily on what they've now changed about themselves. And I'm not sure people will buy that Kamala's changed from being... I mean, she's a tough cookie, right? And I don't expect her, if she was in government, to be soft on crime. I don't think any of the country expects her to be soft on crime. Joe Biden, sure, because Joe Biden will just get pulled off in any direction that people take him. But I think Kamala's weakness actually is Joe Biden. Kamala's weakness is what she said about Joe Biden. And I think she should be asked to defend or completely condemn her own comments of that debate, do you think?
I think that would be a very, very good optics moment for the Trump campaign, a self-cutting attack ad if you see Kamala Harris either A, refusing to go back on what she said about Joe Biden, or more importantly, if she does go back, then why should voters really trust her on anything she says? It goes back to what we were talking about, how it's just saying what's convenient at the time. Okay,
we're going to make sure that we... I remember what she said last time when she was asked about this. She goes... It was a debate. It was a debate. It was a debate. Do you remember this?
Yes.
It just unhinged sort of cackling and repetition of the words, which is how you can tell a liar from a mile off. We have more to bring you, and we'll make sure that after the show at 4 p.m. Eastern Time today, we'll be tweeting all of the links to all of these Kamala scoops from Natalie Winters, from the National Pulse on Twitter, which is @TheNatPulse. Natalie Winters, who is @Natalie G. Winters, will also tweet it. And I'm @Raheem Kassam, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I forgot my fan again. It gets very hot in here in the breaks. Welcome back to the show. Somebody's going to tell me off in the production team. We're talking about the debate tonight, and we'll be here tonight myself, Governor Eric Greitens, and Dr. Gina Loudon, along with a whole host of other personalities and commentators and experts from all across the Real America's Voice network and our group of friends and our family out there of contributors. So we're looking forward to that tonight. Make sure you tune in here on Real America's Voice at 8 p.m. for the pre-show. We'll have uninterrupted coverage of the debate as it takes place. And then who knows, we might eat some pizza on air like we did last week in the post-debate show, where we'll break down and dissect the things which were said and the things which were left unsaid. And this comes back to a problem that I often have with the way the right debates, is it will often just gravitate toward the ground that the left is creating for it. So healthcare, for instance, get totally bogged down in the healthcare debate, which it's fair to say the right doesn't have answers to that question right now. Claimed to have so many answers when Obamacare was being passed. Haven't really seen anything of great significance from the political right in this country or any others, quite frankly, on the issue of healthcare. But instead of sort of ceding that ground, see, I did it there myself. Just went off on a little thing about healthcare. I trapped myself. I fell for my own ruse. Reject the premise of the question. You know, the left is very good at that. In debate, you see them time and time again when they're asked uncomfortable questions. A few times they were asked uncomfortable questions by reporters. You just totally reject the premise of the question, even when the question is very simple, like, hey, Nancy Pelosi, what are these arrows you have in your quiver? Good morning. Sunday morning. Yeah, that's rejecting the premise of the question to a bizarre length, but that is what they do. They just don't answer it. They move to something that they're more comfortable with. And so Republicans have to do the same thing and take the fight to the other side. You know, on the economy, for instance, I've got a few notes here of what I think really should be the focal points this evening. On the economy, for instance, you know, Kamala Harris will either try and not talk about the economy, or she'll talk about a green new economy, or she'll talk about how the economy has gone down in recent months. But the track record for the majority of this administration, for the majority of this term of this administration, has been an upward trajectory, the likes of which the country hasn't seen before. And I don't mean that as in certain numbers are higher, there will be certain numbers higher, there will be certain numbers lower. I mean the aggregate life improvement for people in general, no matter what their background was that it was one of the most equitable economic rises in human history in that period of time. And I think those are almost the precise words that Mike Pence needs to get up there and say, and challenge Kamala on that. Now, I'm not an economist, and I'm not an economic expert by any stretch of the imagination. But I just happen to believe that this nation cares the most about where its jobs and its economy are going in the next year. That's their number one issue for most people out there. And it also happens to be the best issue for this president and the vice president.
Exactly. The economy, exactly. The economy that was built by the likes of President Trump, his cabinet, and Vice President Pence really worked for the Americans that I think the Democratic Party purports to defend the most, right? Whether it was minorities, racially, ethnically, even women. But you saw record employment, record wage gains.
And record unemployment.
Yeah.
But that's the point, isn't it? That's what Kamala's going to push back with. Yeah, you saw record employment. You also saw record unemployment. That's what she's going to be sassy like that tonight, because it worked for her in the Democrat debates. Will that attitude work against the vice president?
I don't know, because I think Vice President Pence has so much stature as such a polished individual that I think her sass, it might come off a little, not rude, but I don't necessarily know how it will
fit the moment.
Yeah, and also just it goes back to what we were talking about before, how I think most Americans don't really like Kamala Harris. I mean, not even the Democratic Party, right? She didn't win the nomination. She had a complete free fall in terms of her polling before she had to drop out of the race. And then for political points, if I was Pence, I think I would also bring up Hunter Biden and get Kamala Harris to comment on that, force the issue, right? That's why President Trump had to, allegedly interrupt so much and really reroute the direction of the debate, because Chris Wallace wasn't necessarily asking the kind of questions that not only the American people wanted to hear, but even from a campaign perspective, you'd want to hear.
Yeah, well, fine, but who's the moderator tonight?
Susan Page is the moderator, a mainstream establishment journalist. She's written biographies on Barbara Bush and has a forthcoming one on Nancy Pelosi.
Called
Madam Speaker. So, again, she totally comes from the swamp. She now, I believe, is at USA Today, has been on the likes of every mainstream media outlet, has contributed to the New York Times, a host of outlets. So she's definitely no Trump fan. Is she a Steve Scully that interned for Joe Biden and has said that he's, quote, on fire? Not necessarily, but she's definitely not of the Trump worldview.
We've got about 2 minutes here, and I want to get into this thing about... And by the way, I've got no problems with lefties moderating these debates if they're lefties who write books like No One Left to Lie To by Christopher Hitchens, which is about Bill Clinton. But these are propagandists that they've got moderating these debates. And the so-called bipartisan commission, right? The bipartisan commission is stacked to the gunnels with never-Trumpers, even on the right. Even on the Republican side, inside that bipartisan commission. They're the ones who put these things together. So the decks are clearly stacked here. Maybe we should get the United Nations in to look at the bipartisan debate commission.
And the Transition Integrity Project while we're at it.
Right. But in the minute we've got left, in the next segment we're going to talk about Kamala Harris's husband.
Yes.
But just tease us quickly with it. Where has he worked?
DLA Piper, which is a huge multinational law firm, boasts a China practice with nearly 140 individuals on staff.
Wow. All right. That's just a teaser for you. So stick around for the next segment. We'll be talking about Kamala Harris's husband's ties to the Chinese Communist Party. You're not seeing that as the lead story on the New York Times or on Politico. Not even asking questions. Nothing from Axios, nothing from CNN, nothing from any of these so-called news outlets. But we'll get to the bottom of it, because that's what we do here at the National Pulse. I want to say a great thank you to everybody who's signing up for the site. You can go to fundrealnews.com and support our work. The more members, the more scoops. The more scoops. Maybe we'll get back to a normal journalistic environment in this country sometime soon. We'll be back in just a second. Welcome back. Well, there I was yesterday saying that, the market is in free fall because of the announcement on the stimulus, which is another thing I think they should really get into tonight. And then today the president tweets this morning that he is open to signing and making sure that people get some checks to help them out during these what remain tough times for people out there. And the market shoots back up, and it doesn't just shoot back up when it fell yesterday. I think it was down about 400, 450 by the end of the day yesterday. Up 550 so far today on a real tear, which is all good news as far as I'm concerned. And as Steve Cortez reminded us yesterday, just record levels across the board at the moment. And maybe that isn't in touch with reality for a lot of people out there. I get that. I get that the market isn't everything. But in an election month, which is what we're in right now, it's very important that the market keeps moving upwards for this president. Just wanted to bring you a quick update on that. Now, back to Natalie Winters about Kamala Harris's husband. Hit us.
So Douglas Emhoff is her husband, and as I said, he is a high-level partner at a huge law firm known as DLA Piper. So DLA Piper has advised a host of Chinese Communist Party linked and owned companies, whether it's Tencent, which as we know owns the WeChat app, which is set to be banned by the Trump administration for the fact that it provides the Chinese Communist Party with backdoor access to all the content on the app, whether it's state-owned companies that are, quote, under the direct supervision of the Chinese Communist Party, advising them on billion-dollar tech deals, advising state-owned airlines, you name it. And what's more, the firm actually has a host of former and even current Chinese Communist Party officials actually on staff. The firm's head is actually on the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which is really one of the paramount decision-making bodies within the Chinese Communist Party. This firm has also gained a host of awards, recognition from state-owned, state-linked bodies, which give out, whether it's awards for having the best legal practice, striking the most deals, you name it. So while it's definitely not on the Hunter Biden level, it's a similar story in the fact that his law firm has profited immensely from the Chinese Communist Party.
It's a great story, and we're going to be putting all of these back up on the website and on our social media feeds today to remind people, hopefully remind Vice President Mike Pence and his team that Kamala has so much to answer for, that she's never had to explain, that she's never had to, people don't know that. I mean, if you're one of the 5 million people that come to the National Pulse, you might know. But the broader country, the wider country out there, most voters don't understand just how tied up she is in just so much corruption. Because she looks and she's sold as one of these fresh faces of the Democrat Party, right? But she's not. She has been around for a while now. She has been around for a while now, right? And she's tied up in all the similar things that Joe Biden is tied up in. Now, maybe not all the things, especially not as it relates to Russia. Joe Biden really, really high up there with all the stories that is coming out of Just the News and John Solomon's team and Paul Sperry and the Real Clear Investigations teams and the Federalists chasing down this Russia hoax. What Thomas Farnan wrote, that great ebook that we released a couple of weeks ago, The Russia Lie, therussialie.com. They lied. They lied about something that cost tens of millions of dollars to investigate, took so much life and air and brains out of so many people in this country, stopped an administrating, stopped the governance of a nation, in fact, Constantly the wheels were churning to lie to you about Russia, over and over. They're doing it again this time. You got the national website for people who like VladimirPutin.com or whatever the latest phony interference mantra is. Remember, they're saying, election interference, bad. But election interference, good. When it comes from one place, when it comes from another place, different things apparently. TheRussiaLie.com is the URL you want to go to. And you want to read through Thomas Farnan's book. I was not across the Russia issue because, frankly, I was sick and tired of Louise Mensch, hi Louise, calling me a Russian agent all the time because of what we did in the UK with Brexit and because of what happened over here with President Trump. I'm a Russian agent because their side lost a referendum and an election. I think I've only written about Russia once before that, before 2016, and that was to attack the Russian embassy in London for trying to sell some propaganda crap that Russia was pushing at the time. So I'm not going to be lectured by Louise Mensch, hi Louise, or anyone about Russia and foreign interference. 17.4 million people went out on June the 23rd, 2016 to vote for something they cared about. National sovereignty. The future of their country. The country that... I remember we always hear this. The older voters will always vote Conservative and vote for Brexit because older people are bigoted or whatever it is, right? That's the... No. The older people have nothing to gain. 5 years, 10 years, whatever, however long they're left on the planet for. They're doing it for the next generation because they care. They're wiser. They're more experienced. They're more level-headed. It's not my opinion. You go through a lot of these crosstabs. I know a lot of you get very excited when I say crosstabs. It's my thing lately. But you go through a lot of these crosstabs and you can see the distinction, the difference in age groups and how people react to different things. Panic that people have, optimism, pessimism that people have. The older voters are always just a little bit more level-headed about things. You know me, I'm not so level-headed. I get very worked up here. Just extemporaneous rants down the barrel of this camera. All right, when we come back, more on Kamala Harris. See you in a second. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, joined in studio by Natalie Winters here, broadcasting live from downtown in Washington, D.C., where we'll also be bringing you live debate night coverage here on Real America's Voice. And I have a request for you. Since we get up every day and do this show as a service to you, I hope you're learning things. If you're not learning things, what are you watching for? And I hope you're doing things. I hope you're taking action on the back of the things that we're saying, whether it's making sure more people see the stories, sharing them, etc., etc. Doing things. And if you're not doing things with the information, what are you watching for? You know, watch a cartoon or something. We break news here every single day. We break news on the National Pulse website every single day. Whether it's a small nugget that we pull out from somewhere else, buried leads as we call them, in our breaking section on the homepage, whether it's longer investigations, and we do have some of those coming up soon. Eric Schmidt. We break news here every day for you. We want something out of you guys, if you don't mind. Let's make sure people tune in tonight to Real America's Voice. Tell them, Real America's Voice. We can get it on the Dish Network, on Pluto, on Roku, wherever you watch it, YouTube, whatever you want to watch it on. Share the links. Let's show people what real analysis looks like here at 8 p.m. Eastern Time today. 9 p.m. uninterrupted coverage of the debate, and depending on how much Johnny Black I've had, we'll do some post-debate analysis as well. Natalie Winters. That's you.
Yes.
Tell us about Kamala Harris's admission that people in the mainstream media did not want to cover, did not give it even any lip service to. What did she say? She
said, quote, "I am a radical."
Okay.
Talking about how her opponent had painted her as her Republican opponent when she was running in California as a radical on a host of issues, whether it was law and order, criminal justice, gender, you name it. And she leaned in. She adopted the term, and she was speaking at Google headquarters, and she told the entire Google crowd, in which she also basically asked them to donate to her campaign and asked for their help on her campaign, speaking again to the close relationship between Democrats and big tech. But she said it, "I'm radical," and she gave on a rambling explanation about how she really embraced the word, and that was what she aligned her political philosophy with. She didn't necessarily explain what exactly radical meant to her, but in today's day and age, there's definitely a connotation that comes with that, and she agreed.
Have you seen that anywhere else, by the way?
Well, I was going to say, it's not that the mainstream media refuses to cover it. The clip had never been cut. The story had never been broken. The words had never appeared on the screen of any TV, of any news outlet until we broke the story. You would think that whether it be opposition, even if it was during the Democratic primary, that some of the more mainstream Democratic candidates would have cut that. That's a great attack ad. Or even honestly, the Trump campaign, you would have thought that they would have, gone through some of her old speeches and perhaps cut the clip as well. But
yeah, what I thought. You would have thought. Kamala Harris is a bad dude. Runs a bunch of bad boys. Right? Remember that? Corn Pop. Corn Pop was a bad dude, ran a bunch of bad boys. But Kamala Harris is a bad dude, run a bunch of bad boys. And one of the bunch of bad boys that Kamala Harris used to run was this group that's linked to the Transition Integrity Project, right? I really want to hear Vice President Pence tonight bring that up. Give us more details.
Sure. So Newco Strategies was hired briefly. It's unclear if they're still hired, but by the Transition Integrity Project, which, again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's this group that's linked to George Soros, the Chinese Communist Party, and whether it's a street fight or putting actors out on the street, they want to make sure a Joe Biden victory comes true. So they hired this consulting firm, and one of their founding directors and a partner is Emmy Ruiz, who not only was a senior advisor to Harris's failed presidential campaign, but she also spoke at the DNC. And this firm, on their Twitter account, their pinned tweet actually said that they, quote, worked with the Kamala Harris campaign. So again, not only is this the fact that we've seen the Transition Integrity Project funneling, tens of thousands of dollars to the Biden campaign, we've also seen former Obama alumni working and really comprising the main core of the group. It's just further proof that the Transition Integrity Project is not bipartisan, is not neutral. It's a hardcore Democrat activist group. And we've asked Rosa Brooks on Twitter, identify at least one person in your group who supports President Trump. Come on the show. And every single time, they've always refused to engage. In fact, the only thing they're comfortable saying is that former Trump administration advisors should be put to death for thinking other than they do.
Extraordinary stuff. I just got some breaking news that's hitting me right now. Coming out of Michigan, looks like one of the latest polls. This is straight off the Citizen Free Press, by the way. Make sure you go to citizenfreepress.com. There's very good news for John James in Michigan, I believe. He's taken the lead in one of the latest polls up there. We'll be bringing you more details of that as we get details of it. But I was just checking because I love going through the details on so much of this stuff now, and I was looking at the weighting while you were speaking. I can do two things. I was looking at the regional participation in this poll, which is another really interesting data point that comes out of some of these things, and they're actually heavily more weighted towards Democrat-leaning areas, and John James still comes out on top in this poll, so he must be doing excellently up in Michigan. So there you go, you learned something. Now, what are we going to talk about in the next segment? Because you've got a bunch of stories, but there's this one that really took off yesterday. It's about Joe Biden. I will never, ever, after this whole election thing's done, I'd be so happy to never say the words Joe Biden again. But Joe Biden is on the record having praised the Chinese Communist Party's plan. Tease us before the break.
He said, quote, "We also welcome and are really encouraged by the 12th five-year plan and the reordering of the economy toward a more consumer-based economy when speaking in China in 2011.
Joe Biden. But here's the thing. I mean, why does it take Natalie Winters to go back and find these things out? Well, whatever. We'll take the traffic to the site. Make sure you're going to thenationalpulse.com. Yesterday on my Twitter feed, I shared an image of us I was signing books and we're packaging all the membership packages up, because if you join as a member, you get a whole host of freebies from us. It's actually quite expensive to service the membership. We calculated it yesterday. Head on over to fundrealnews.com and help us out. We'll see you in a second.